Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Today, Rich and I are going to preview the AFC and NFC championship games, so make sure you stick around. Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. I'm Ray, he's Rich, and just like every week, we're here to preview the games of the weekend. The games this weekend just happen to be the AFC and NFC championship games. We'll look at those from both a betting and DFS angle, so make sure you stick around to get our thoughts, mostly Rich's thoughts, let's be honest, mostly Rich's thoughts on those games. Before we get there, however, I do want to let you know that we have a good deal running at the site. Conference championships are here. We want you to win this weekend. You get full access to all of our conference championship betting recommendations for just $25. Also, as a part of that, you'll get access to Rich's game previews, the worksheet previews, as we call them, which are worth the price of admission, a full in-depth preview of every game. All of that, betting recommendations, Rich's worksheets, just $25. This also includes our bet of the week and our elevated props, our sides, our totals, all of that. Our best bets of the week have been on fire. We won again in the divisional round, improving our record on those bets to 15-3. And our best bet of this week is already out. And it's one that I know Rich and I we gave our seal of approval. We're happy about the bet of the week this week for sure. Elevated props have continued to do well in the playoffs as well. Perfect 4-0 record over the first two rounds for the season. These bets are 36-12, which is 75% hit. So these elevated props, these best bets, we're doing really well on these. Join again for just $25. Head over to sharp.football and check that out. All right, let's get into the weekend. I think last weekend, normally we talk about the divisional round as like the best weekend of football, and it was a fun weekend of football, especially when you add in the the national championship game and all the stuff that happened in college. But it wasn't the best level of football in some of these games that we watched. And in general, like I think it's probably, if I were an NFL coach, I would simply suggest to my players that perhaps we shouldn't be turning the ball over as much as some of these teams were doing, that perhaps it would be better to not turn the ball over. But it was one of those weird weekends. And you mentioned, we had talked about it offline, is that even before you started digging into the numbers, you were just watching the games and going, this has to be like the most turnovers we've ever seen in the divisional rounds. And that turned out to be the case, right?
Yeah, when I was watching it, was like, man, I was like, because there was a ton of turnovers in that Bills-Broncos game. Obviously, the night game on Saturday night was just kind of a blowout, and it wasn't like really much of a game at all. And then obviously it was a turnover fest in Patriots. Texans as well. I'm just like, man, there's a lot of turnovers. Caleb Williams had those turnovers. It's like, wow. And then I look up, there was 20 turnovers last week. It was the most in the divisional round since 2001. And all four winners still won the turnover battle by two or more. Even the Patriots won the turnover battle by two or more because CJ Stroud had a pretty rough outing.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't ideal
as well. But yeah, we now seen back-to-back games though where like Drake May is like impervious to like understanding like pocket awareness in the playoffs.
Yeah,
it's like crazy. He like drops back and it's just like he just is so nonchalant about just like, you know what, I'll just stand back here, it'll be cool. But even they turned it over three times.
I wonder if that'd be a problem this week against the Broncos. I wonder if that's something we'll talk about as we get into
the Broncos. Better hope it's a problem, but yeah, I mean, but it's still tried and true. Like in these playoffs, like if you turn the ball over fewer times than your opponent, you're still probably gonna have a shot to win. Playoff teams in the Super Bowl era now that have won the turnover battle have an 81% winning percentage. So tried and true. And then if you're a Seattle fan, you look at these two games they played against the Rams, and you're like, we got to turn it over fewer times than we did in the regular season, right?
Yeah, like it'd almost be impossible not to. That is one of the things about these games as we get into that one, we'll talk more about it as we get to it, is that Rams and Seahawks game is so interesting because it's obviously the third time that they've played. And normally you would go into a game that you have two previous examples from the season and also later in the season examples. It's not like they played in week 2, right? Like these are teams that played in the back half of the season twice, and now we're getting them again a third time. And you say, okay, well, I should know a lot about what I expect this game to be, but the Seahawks have changed on the way they're doing on offense. The Rams have changed. Their defense hasn't been as good. We obviously had all those turnovers in those games that turnovers change games. They change how you're going to approach. They change your offensive approach, your pass rate, your run rate. And so when I looked at that game, you have this like belief of, okay, this is the third game. I'm going to be able to really really know what each team's going to try to do and then go and see. And we just don't for that game. And then we also don't for the Broncos and Patriots, obviously, because of the Bo Nix injury, unfortunately, which conspiracy Ray, I call him Bubba Ray. Bubba Ray is my conspiracy alter ego. And did we actually see Bo Nix get hurt? Like, we're just taking their word for it. They didn't put him on injured reserve. Conspiracy Ray's got questions. But assuming that you all trust the media and that Bo Nix is not going to play on Sunday, we're obviously going to get Jarrett Stidham in that game. And so you head into this weekend and you just have all sorts of questions, right? About what we're going to see. And it seems, maybe this is just recency bias, maybe this is how it is every year, this seems different for a divisional round that we normally see, but I guess that fits for this season as well.
Oh yeah, this is 2020. And even if like a quarterback like Jarrett Stidham were to, get through and win a Super Bowl, or some people even talk about Sam Darnold winning a Super Bowl, like we've been over the course of our lives seen a lot of one-off quarterbacks since it was like Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl, right? Like it's like to act like you still can't win a Super Bowl with someone just because you don't have Tom Brady or Peyton Manning is this is just not reality, and it's definitely hasn't been the reality in 2025 football either.
Yeah, it's been tough scenes. Like we talked about those turnovers. The best, I think the best quarterback in the league. I don't know where you stand on Josh Allen as the best quarterback in the league or not right now, but he was a big part of those turnovers.
Watch yourself, hot topic, man.
He was a big part of those turnovers. So not getting the same hate that some of the other quarterbacks are getting. That's interesting to me. Just interesting, something to throw out there. You mentioned in the State of the Union, as I call it, the worksheet where you introduce the worksheet, the State of the Union. You talked, as you have been doing, about kind of the ATS records, the against spread records, straight up records. And I thought it was interesting you had in there that home teams are 32-14 since 2002 and 15-5 in the last 10 years. Of course, you also added in there that 40 of 46 of those home teams have been favored, obviously, right, because of the supposed Bo Nix injury. We are not getting that this year with the Patriots, but this has been a round in which the home teams and the favorite teams have tended to take care of business, which I guess is really interesting thing for the Seahawks if you're looking to bet that side of it.
Yeah, it's been kind of the number one seeds have really held court. It's what puts Denver in kind of a unique spot. They're the first home underdog in this round since the 2017 Eagles, who had Nick Foles, who tweeted about Jarrett Stidham and let him know.
What happened with that? What happened with that team, with the Nick Foles team?
Yeah, I mean, I will say when we get into the Stidham stuff, his situation is a lot different than like him or like a Jeff Hostetler, right? Like those guys started at the end of the regular season. The history for quarterbacks making their first start of the year in the postseason has not been very kind at all to those teams, but it's just a unique circumstance. And listen,
when you listed those names in the worksheet and Cotter Cook, I hadn't thought of Cotter Cook in forever. Like I don't even remember when he started, but you said Cotter Cook and it just like unlocked a memory from my brain.
Against the Texans. Yeah.
Some of those names that you have in there are just like, oh
yeah.
Wow.
And there's one is an asterisk too. We'll go over when we get there, but but I mean, hey, that's what you're hoping for, right? If you're a Broncos fan, you're still looking at this from the situation of saying, like the Eagles, like, hey, we have a talented team built around this quarterback still. We have a good enough defense to win us a single elimination game. We've got a good enough offensive line. The question when we start breaking this game down is like, are they going to be able to run the ball, sustain up? This was already an offense that had question marks with Bo Nix coming into this game, if Bo Nix was going to play. So it just takes it a step further. But these, number one seeds versus number two seeds, they've won 14 of the 19 times that these teams have played since that NFL expansion to 32 teams. And then in the case of the Rams, like it's very rare for 5 or lower seeds to get this far. But when they do get this far and they're able to pull it out, they usually win the Super Bowl. So that's what you have going for you for the Rams, is that like, hey, if they win this game, they're probably going to be a good spot. They're only 3-8 in this round, 5 seeds or lower, but all 3 of them that won did go on to win the Super Bowl. So that's kind of what you're looking for if you've got the Rams saying like, hey, this could be. And I think a lot of people are treating that NFC game like the Super Bowl a little bit. I still think the Patriots are a lot better team than the public gives them credit for, because one, they hate the Patriots, and I think the strength of schedule stuff has been a little bit overrated for them.
Well, that was the thing about, I was looking at the Super Bowl odds earlier this week, and I believe both the Rams and Seahawks had better Super Bowl odds than the Patriots, which I think that the Seahawks and Rams are better than the Patriots, but the Patriots have anything can happen. Drake May can fumble the ball 4 times against the Broncos defense. We'll get into that. But the Patriots have a much easier path into the Super Bowl. And just getting there and you get into a single game, anything could happen. And so, yeah, I do think that idea of like this being like a foregone conclusion, it might be. I think the Seahawks and Rams are the 2 best teams left. I thought that they were the 2 best teams for a long time. And so this is not that surprising that we're here, but anything can happen. That single elimination football game, anything can happen in a single elimination football game. And that's always the thing we preach is we think we know how they're going to try to do things. Is that how it's going to work out? And what changes, as Mike Tyson says, when you get punched in the mouth, we'll have to see. But let's get into that Broncos and Patriots game. Before we do that, though, we do need to throw it to Warren Sharp to reveal our PrizePicks lineup for the AFC and NFC championship games.
It's time for us to build this week's PrizePicks lineup and turn $100 into $600. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports with their easy-to-use app. And now you can play $5 and get $50 instantly in lineups when you use code Warren after you download their app. We're in conference championship round. There's only 2 games, but we do have a 3-card lineup going for you. And as a reminder, PrizePicks will give you $50 in lineups instantly when you build your first $5 lineup. Use code Warren or click the link in the description below. Let's get started with the conference championship lineup. And for that, we're turning to Rhamondre Stevenson, and we're looking at his rushing attempts. And we're going more than 12.5. So we're looking for him to get at least 13 rushing attempts. Now, as you can see, this is not something that you can kind of look at history and say, this is probably going to happen. As after all, he hit it last week, but the prior 4 weeks, he frankly didn't even come close to getting 13. However, I think there's a few things going for us in this particular matchup. Number one, you've got the Patriots 1 step away from the Super Bowl, and they're going up against a very good pass defense and a very good pass rush of the Denver Broncos, who are starting a relatively unknown quarterback without a lot of experience in Jarrett Stidham. If you think that a defensive-minded head coach in Mike Vrabel is going to want to come into this game and just chuck the ball all around the field for all 4 quarters, even if they're leading, I don't think you know Mike Vrabel very well. I definitely think that there's going to be a desire and a goal to try to get a lead, but I do think that there's a large part of the game plan here that's going to be, let's not make mistakes. Let's have some production on the ground. And I do think this Denver Broncos run defense is a little bit overrated based upon some of the opponents that they've gone up against. Also, I saw last week's game, and if you saw last week's game as well, you know that prior to Rhamondre Stevenson leaving that game with an eye injury, he was vastly outperforming TreVeyon Henderson on the ground. Henderson was terrible running the football for most of that game. Once Rhamondre left with the eye injury, TreVeyon did have some runs that were more productive, but I think this team still trusts Rhamondre a bit more. And in this game, they gave him 16 rushing attempts last week against the Houston Texans in a game that he was out for a good quarter and a half, if not longer. I think that Rhamondre Stevenson more than 12.5 is a good look here. Next up, we're going to go to the NFC Championship game, and we've got 2 looks for you in this game. And the first one is Kyren Williams to go more than 11.5 receiving yards. This is the opposite of the Rhamondre Stevenson rushing attempts. Kyren Williams has cleared this number relatively consistently 5 consecutive games. He has had at least 12 receiving yards. You're going up against a team as an underdog on the road where they're playing the number 1 ranked run defense. So you factor all those things in together. An underdog likely will pass the football a little bit more if they are trailing. A team going up against the number 1 run defense may not have as much success running the football, so they might need to pass the football a little bit more there as well. And in just a win or go home, total desperation type game, definitely an opportunity here for Kyren to see more than 11.5 receiving yards. Conversely, Davante Adams is in a very difficult matchup. He is going up against the Rams. Now, you don't see them listed here below because in his prior 5 games, though they did play, the Rams played the Seahawks, Davante Adams was not available and healthy for that game, so he did not play. But Davante Adams is in a very difficult matchup here. against these wide receivers and is being used in a bit of a different way, as you can kind of see here. They definitely needed him against a very bad secondary of the Carolina Panthers. He did have 72 yards in that game, but against the Chicago Bears, he was mainly used down inside of the red zone. He's mainly used in a situational basis. And I think against a very great Seattle Seahawks secondary, the same thing is going to hold true, where they're going to use him in more situational manner, and they're not going to see as many targets thrown his way or as many receptions that he records. And also, they rarely throw him underneath stuff like they did once, a long time ago when Davante Adams was a bit younger. Now it's a little bit more down the field type targets, some contested catch type targets. And against this tight coverage of the Seattle Seahawks, it'll be difficult to see him catching enough passes to clear this number, especially where they're more likely to deploy and target him, which is down inside of the red zone a little bit more frequently. So less than 49.5 receiving yards for Davante Adams. This is our 3-player lineup for PrizePicks. And as a reminder, if you use the code Warren or click on the link below, you can get $50 in lineups instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks is available in 40 states, including California and Texas. So don't delay. If you like this lineup that we've built here, you want to take advantage of it and try to match it, go ahead, work over at PrizePicks, use the link below, and good luck.
All right, we've got New England at Denver, 42.5 point total. The Patriots are 4.5 point road favorites. As we mentioned at the top of the show, that's odd to have a road favorite, especially a road favorite of that much heading into this championship game. However, we obviously know why. Bo Nix is injured and out for the season. I'm joking about the conspiracy stuff, but am I joking? Bubba Ray's not joking, but Ray himself is joking about the Bo Nix stuff. So, we have this obviously looming over it. We also have injury questions for Denver. J.K. Dobbins has been, he started practicing again, and so he is eligible to come off injured reserve. Is that going to happen? We don't know. Pat Bryant and Troy Franklin both practiced on Wednesday, but, coming back from a concussion, and it was kind of a scary-looking concussion for Bryant as well. And didn't he have another concussion?
His second, the Jaguars game, he left at the end of that game. Remember, that was scary, too. He got carted off.
Yeah, so that part of it is weird to me. And then Franklin, a hamstring injury, we know about soft tissue injuries. And so you have injuries all throughout this team. And then obviously the one to Bo Nix, we're going to get Jarrett Stidham. And so as you look at this whole game, and I think we can talk about the Patriots side and the Broncos defense and kind of the ways that they can keep this game close, but really this game is going to be about Jarrett Stidham and what we see from him. And so what do you expect from Stidham in this matchup?
It's a bit of a wild card, right? Because, we don't have a big sample of the NFL, for Stidham. This is only his 5th start. His previous 4 starts, 2 came at the end of the season for the Raiders, and then 2 came at the end of the season in 2023 for the Broncos when they basically were punting on Russell Wilson. Not great offensive environments that he was attached into. This is a little bit of a better situation for him. But we just don't know, right? And when you look at this Broncos team, it was already an offense that was very volatile with Bo Nix, a player that they already, deemed a lot better than Jarrett Stidham. And because they, after seeing Jarrett Stidham for 2 games at the end of 2023, they went and drafted Bo Nix in the top 10. They did bring him back. So obviously Sean Payton is a supporter of Jarrett Stidham. It's just,
I also want to say they paid him a lot for a backup quarterback.
Right.
He is making a lot of money as backup quarterbacks go, which says something about how they feel about him. Of course, it says more that they drafted Bo Nix, how they feel about him.
Correct. And that's kind of I think what Milton Williams' point was. And I know a lot of people were taking that clip and running with it, but it's just hey, man, they thought the other guy was better. We're not going to treat it the same. Why should you? But even with Bo Nix, Denver was 16th in points per drive, 19th success rate. They punted at the 8th highest rate in the NFL, their drives, 29th in rate of drives that failed to gain a first down this season. So they were already a very volatile offense. And I think the big thing that comes from this game, the question mark that you have from Bo Nix to Jarrett Stidham, is that Bo Nix, no matter what side of the fence you come on Bo Nix, if you believe he's an elite talent or he's good enough, is the one thing is this guy doesn't create a lot of negative plays. He is the best sack rate in the NFL. He protects the football. And in the small sample we've had Jarrett Stidham in the NFL, it's been the complete opposite. He's taken a truckload of sacks, and he's thrown the ball to the other team a ton. Again, it's a very small sample, but out of 102 quarterbacks to throw the ball at least 150 times since Jarrett Stidham entered the NFL, he's 90th in interception rate. And obviously, like I said, the huge amount of sacks that he's taken to as well. And when he's been under pressure in the very small sample, he's been a disaster too. So like those are the question marks you have. Again, small sample. We don't want to run wild with it. But then we talk about too, it's like, well, how often has this really happened, right? I know a lot of people like to talk about Nick Foles, then Jeff Hostetler from like my day, and I'm sure producer Adam's the same way. Remembers, Jeff Hostetler
from my day.
Yeah,
How old are you?
Yeah, well, I'm a lot older than people always think I am, but only 6 times as a quarterback in the Super Bowl era started a playoff game that did not start a game in the regular season. And there's one with a major asterisk too. One is Roger Staubach in 1972, who won the Super Bowl the year prior, but got injured in the preseason that year. Came in the divisional round and got a come behind victory, but then started the next week and the Cowboys got blown out by the then Redskins, if we're allowed to say that name still, got smoked. But they're 1-5 in those games. Out of the most famous, the win is the most famous one. Frank Reich coming back down 35-3 against the then Oilers. You're Houston Oilers.
Yes, thanks for bringing that up. I really appreciate it.
That's the most famous one. But again, they were down 35-3. I'm pretty sure if this game's 35-3 at any point, I'm not going to kind of Jarrett Stidham, wheeling and dealing.
You're not going to be live betting the Broncos?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Cornelius Bennett's not coming out of there to create some havoc. But the last one was Taylor Heineke in 2020 for the Commanders against Tom Brady. He did throw for 306 yards, but only completed half his passes, 1 touchdown, 1 reception. Connor Cook, who you alluded to in 2016, he was 18 of 45 in that game, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. The infamous Joe Webb in 2012 for the Vikings was 11 of 30 in that game, passing for yards. Then you got to go back to 1983. Gary Danielson started no touchdowns, 5 interceptions in that game. And then
our beloved Gary Danielson. Why would you say that? Didn't he just retire from CVS? Why would you say this about Gary Danielson?
Yeah, so it's just the track record of this happening, like in pulling the lightning bolt. You need Frank Reich, right? And like he was down 35-3. Just the track record's not great for this. It's not a good spot. Also, like you typically when you get this spot, you like to lean on the teams that have the better quarterback. And no matter how you feel about Jarrett Stidham, and I don't know, who was it? Josh Palmer, who had the statement of, if both quarterbacks play their best, Jarrett Stidham's best is not far off from Drake May's. Like, that's the most ludicrous statement I've ever heard, like anyone in the media, like absolutely drop, right? There's a backup quarterback. If there were really NFL executives that thought the best of Jarrett Stidham was even comparable to the best of Drake May, like he would be starting somewhere. So it's still
one of these guys is arguably the MVP and the other one is the backup to Bo Nix. All due respect to Bo Nix, I think I'm going to take the one who's arguably an MVP. I think I'll take that guy.
So when you look at this on the top down, you say, all right, the way Denver's been operating to tail end this year's season is something we've talked about. Like they've gone extremely pass heavy. They're second in the NFL since the J.K. Dobbins injury and pass rate over expectation. And they really lean down Bo Nix. And you're like, all right, well, what if J.K. Dobbins comes back? What if we can insulate him? And like, this is just such a tough matchup for the Denver running game that they're going to have to get something from Jarrett Stidham. Like you're going to have to drop back against the New England Patriots, because when they have Milton Williams and Robert Spillane and Kyrie Tonga, like teams have not run the football on them at all. So this is a Denver team that's been very volatile rushing the football. And then you have Dobbins come. He hasn't played in 2 months. Like, so what even are we going to get out of him if he does dress? So there's a lot of question marks here in just terms of how like this offense is going to have to operate, with the removal of Bo Nix from the lineup.
And I like the point you made about the running game, because it was better with Dobbins than it was with Harvey, but it wasn't great with Dobbins. It wasn't like this elite running game. And as you mentioned, now that we have Milton Williams back and Tonga and Robert Spillane, Robert Spillane, one of the more underrated, I think, linebackers in the league. He stacks running game stuff syntax. Like he's done it for a long time that Spillane's been doing that. Now that Spillane is back, I believe he's has a hand injury, but I'm pretty sure he was practicing in full. Those guys are back. This run defense is again back to being what it was at the beginning of the season, which was absolutely elite. And so if you are an injured J.K. Dobbins coming back in your first game for a running game that didn't even really work that great when you were healthy against this defense, like especially one that's not going to respect Stidham as much as they would have Bo Nix. I just don't really see how it's there. And you talked about like the pass rate over expected, and where those passes were happening though is more interesting, right? Happening around the line of scrimmage and getting in screens and things like that. We'll see if Bryant can play. Bryant obviously targeted on all three of his routes, right, before he left. Are they going to try to get him involved? We'll see if Troy Franklin can play. He can be used more on that screen stuff. Marvin Mims can be used there as well. Can we say about Marvin Mims?
Free Marvin Mims, man. We got to get him out of here.
Is he the worst practicer of all? Like, that's the only explanation I can have. Every time they throw the ball to Marvin Mims and give him a real opportunity, he makes plays and wins games for them in the playoffs. Like, what do we... Please just play Marvin Mims. I have no idea what's going on with Marvin Mims, but like we have a lot of options there. Our friend Curtis Hirsch brought up maybe do we dust off the ghost of Evan Ingram here and try to get him more involved if the wide receivers are out. So there are lots of options there. I'm very interested in Stidham because what we saw with the Raiders was more of what I think Jarrett Stidham was, at least in college, which is like throwing the ball down the field, like bombing it, being like a real gunslinger. What we saw with the Broncos was much more reserved, which based on Sean Payton, what he said about Bo Nix, why they like Bo Nix, what they want Bo Nix to do, but seeing what they want him to do. But I'm very interested in, if you just get a lot of pressure around a guy, does he just revert back into being the old guy? And are we getting bombs down the field to sort Sutton and Mims if Mims is playing and stuff like that? I'm really interested to see what version of Stidham we get. I think they probably just want to run the offense the way they've been doing it, but can they do it? I think is a very, very fair question. On the other side with the Broncos defense, this Broncos defense is equipped to take advantage of the glaring weakness that we've seen from Drake May all season. And then especially it's been magnified in the playoffs, which is just him holding the ball and then through holding the ball, taking sacks and ending up, fumbling the ball, having turnovers, things like that. And if the Broncos can come in and force 3 fumbles, like that completely changes the trajectory of what we think this game can be, can obviously win the game for them. And so that matchup is not maybe as important as what we see from Stidham, but that's really important what we see from May. And are they able to kind of coach around that in some way and get the ball out of his hands, like get May to throw the ball? And I think they would be in a much better spot.
Yeah, that's where, if you're looking at Denver, this is where they have to like dominate. This is where you say like you have a clear advantage is your pass rush versus this offensive line. And Drake May by proxy is like he holds ball. He's what I refer to. He's like a big game hunter, right? Like these guys, like he wants to. He's one of the few guys we have left in the NFL that wants to push the rock, man. And I respect him for it, but it's also got him a little bit of trouble. If this offense has like one consistent kind of flaw that they've had basically all season, it is the pass protection. I mean, Drake May's been sacked on 9.4% of his dropbacks. That's 29th in the league. He's taken a sack on 26.5% of his pressures. That's 30th in the league. He's taken 5 sacks in each playoff game. He had 2 fumbles against the Chargers. He had 4 fumbles against the Texans. Only lost 2 of those. He's 27th in the league in time to throw. Only 35% of his passes come within 2.5 seconds. That's 30th in the league. In this postseason, when he's held the ball longer than 2.5 seconds, he's 11 of 24 passing. He does have the high YPA because he's pushing the ball down the field, but 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 7 sacks, 3 fumbles. That's it. When he's gotten the ball out, though, within 2.5 seconds, I mean, 22 of 32, 69%, 7.7 yards per pass attempt. Only difference of 0.6 in yards per pass attempt when he holds the ball, which is 8.3. 3 touchdowns, the interceptions. He's taking 3 sacks on those as well. Denver has a super high sack rate when teams hold the ball against them. You're going to be playing into their hands if you hold the football, just like we talked about this last week with Houston. Same story for them this week. The one difference here is that Texans have a little bit stronger of a resume than the Broncos do. Basically, any functional quarterback the Broncos have faced this year, they've had trouble with. They're probably their largest litmus test is Dak Prescott. But then you look at the other thing. Daniel Jones gave them hell. Jalen Hurts gave them hell. Jackson Dart gave them hell. Since their Week 12 bye, any decent quarterback they faced has given them hell. They gave up 26 points and 362 yards to Jordan Love. They gave up 34 points and 346 yards to Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. Last week, they gave up 30 points and 450 yards to the Bills. They needed all those turnovers that they got. They gave up 26 points and 400 yards to Marcus Mariota, right? Like, that since the bye, they've had games against Trey Lance, Chris Oladukin, Geno Smith. Like, their resume is not as strong as the Texans was coming into last week, where the Texans had a lot of high-end quarterbacks in 2025 context, guys like Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold that they had faced, and they had gotten over against all those guys. Denver, any team that we've seen have really good quarterback play against them, has actually inversely given their defense trouble.
And that is one of my bullets that I have in my notes is, are we sure this Denver defense is actually that good? The one thing is I am sure that they can get pressure.
We do know the pass rush is good.
Yeah. And the pass rush is good. They will get pressure. And that has been the Achilles heel for Drake May. And maybe that's all that matters, because that's their pathway is not limiting the Patriots to, to like shorter drives and holding the offense to 21 points. That's not their path to winning this game. I wouldn't imagine. Their path to winning this game is forcing turnovers, scoring themselves as a defense. And that's what you can do with the pass rush if you're able to force those fumbles or get Drake May to make some bad decisions. Or, maybe Drake May just isn't the greatest downfield passer of all time in one game this season. And maybe that's, maybe you're able to pick one off down the field. But that's really the pathway here. So I'm not as worried about like the down-to-down success for the Broncos as I am, can they create those big plays? And the one spot where they're good, especially you have it in the worksheet, I recommend you go read it. Will Campbell has not been very strong since he came back from injury. This isn't a slight on Will Campbell. I think he'll probably develop into a very good tackle, but since he's come back from injury, hasn't been as great, right? And so like the pass protection hasn't really been there. One way you get around that, if you are the Patriots, is you can just run Ramondre Stevenson a lot. And it seems like Ramondre Stevenson is the guy. We saw last week they kind of lined up in some big formations, just ran with Stevenson, and it worked out for them. It was a good spot for them. So I mean, Stevenson's a guy in this backfield. We expect the game script to be favorable for New England. And so I think we could see, a lot of carries here for Stevenson as they try to just grind their way almost to the Super Bowl.
Right. And it's not like they ran like all over Houston, but they just were good enough. And like, they don't have to be hyper efficient. They just have to be kind of functional at running the football in this game, just to kind of alleviate that pass rush a little bit, just insulate some of those big plays. Cause I guarantee you they're looking at these past 2 games and feeling like they're kind of fortunate with the way Drake May's put the ball on the ground these past weeks to come away with wins. They don't. That's me a big. I'm sure they're preaching this to him. Hey, we got to protect the football in this game, especially here with a backup quarterback on the other side. Like if we protect the football, we should win this game.
Yeah,
play a clean game, we should win this game. So if they're able to just be functional, but Ramondre has been just hot, man. I mean, you look at him so far in the playoffs. He's got 33 touches, 209 yards. We've just seen Trayvon Henderson have 23 touches for 59 yards. And Stevenson, this isn't just in the playoffs, going back his past 7 games, he has at least 77 yards from scrimmage in each of those past 7 games. Over that span, he's played 62% of the snaps to 40% of the snaps for Trayvon Henderson. Some of that is pass protection stuff. This is why you'll probably see him in this game more again, too, is the pass protection stuff. But we've also seen him just be really efficient and create big plays, too, as well. It's not just like he's out here just ham and egging it. He's grading those explosives. You brought up last week about, his high yards per reception, but it's like he's averaging 7.9 yards per touch over his past 7 games. Obviously, that's not a sustainable big picture, and we saw a little of that come down in the receiving game last week. But I expect to see him, operate like at least in like a 60-40% capacity like he's been in this backfield.
I wonder if it's more than that, because it would have been more than that last week.
Oh, with the eye, yeah.
Without the eye injury. And so I wonder if we lean more into Ramondre this week than we did last week, which I could definitely see happening. Because as you mentioned, the pass protection is going to be important. And that's obviously a place where he has a pretty big advantage from what we've seen this season over Trayvon Henderson. And if Henderson's not being super efficient and not creating big plays when he gets the ball, then what's really the goal? What are we trying to do? Like, why not just play Stevenson at that point? And so, yeah, I'm interested to see what the split is. I think it's going to be bigger than it was even last week, assuming obviously we don't see, Ramondre leave the game for a little bit. All right. There's a lot more in the worksheet preview over at Sharp Football Analysis, which remember, you can get everything for conference championship weekend, our betting recommendation, and those worksheet previews for $25. So head over to sharp.football, check out that deal. But I have to ask you, I know you're not super excited about this slate, but I have to ask you that if you were forced to play the 2-game slate, forced to play the classic and the 2-game slate, what are you doing with this game, with this New England Denver game? Obviously, it's going to be different in larger fields. You can get a little more creative and try to play some contrarian aspects, even with Stidham and Mims and Sutton. But like, if you're just playing like a single entry, smaller tournament, a 3-max smaller tournament, what are you trying to do with this game?
Yeah, like I brought up the stuff with Drake May and just like any like solid fantasy quarterback that the Broncos have faced outside of Dak Prescott has basically flirted with 20 plus fantasy points. We didn't even mention too, they've also allowed the back half of the season a lot of rushing production to quarterbacks. You know, obviously Allen last week had the 66 yards, but like all those guys, Lawrence had 20 yards and a touchdown, Mariota 55 yards. Like Trey Lance, they had 70 yards that we can throw him out if you want, but Jordan Love at 29 yards. So there's some rushing aspect too in play here too for Drake May. Obviously he's getting all scrambles. They don't really do a lot of designed runs, but if that pass rush is coming, you look for Drake May to run the football. But yeah, Drake May I think is a standout here because I think we're going to see both quarterbacks in the late game be played, and then obviously people will punt with Stidham as well. Because we didn't really hint about like the Patriots defense, I feel like is the most disrespected unit remaining in the playoffs. I think this defense is very good. They put a lot of money and capital, whether that be free agency or draft capital in this defense. And like, they've been really good. And I know people just bring up the strength of schedule. I remain to say like, hey, winning the games and shutting the teams down you're supposed to shut down actually is proof that you are a good defense.
Yeah, especially Carlton Davis is able to play. Like you have those two corners out there, and you have, like I've talked about Spillane. I love Spillane. You have that defensive front. The pass rush obviously is not great, right? And so they're going to probably look to continue to build there. But the bones are here for a very, very good defense. And obviously, I think a good enough defense is Stidham. We do think Stidham could run a little bit here, though. We've seen that in his career. So maybe Stidham gets there through rushing. We'll have to see. But yeah, I assume he will be very popular, but I would be heavy on Ramondre as well. I would try to be over public on Ramondre because I just think we're going to see a lot from him. All right, let's move on to Rams at Seahawks. This is obviously the big game, the important game, the game that we're all going to really be paying attention to this weekend. 47-point total. The Seahawks are 2.5-point home favorites. I brought it up at the top of the show, but this is an interesting game because it's the third time these teams are playing. But I think we have a lot of questions that we normally wouldn't have for division rivals playing each other in the playoffs. Seattle, as we mentioned last week, has changed their passing attack. They're not throwing it down the field as much. They have injury issues at offensive tackle, which could be very important with, Sam Darnold, and we know how he reacts to pressure. And with the Rams, defense hasn't been as great lately. They still can get pressure. They lost Zach Charbonnet. The Rams, as I mentioned, defense just hasn't been as good lately. Matthew Stafford hasn't been as good lately. The offense went completely off book last week. The way that they decided to call plays and the formations they used against the Bears is just there are a lot of unknowns in this game. It's really hard to say, all right, this is what I expect the Rams to do. This is what I expect the Seahawks to do in this game. It's just a really interesting game in that way.
And the way both regular season games went, as well. You look at both these games were like, when you look at the top down stuff, you're like, oh, like the scores were like, when you add up the scores, the combined yards, like everything's even. And then you kind of are like, well, one team turned the ball over 7 times and the other one turned it over 1 time. And you're like, that's kind of a testament too to how good Seattle can be as a team, right? Like to turn the ball over 7 times against, especially a good team like the Rams.
Yeah.
Like turn it over 7 times against the Rams and still be in the game. And the Bears were in this spot last week too, as well against the Rams. So if they can that's like emphasis number 1 is Seattle. Protect the football just so much better than you did in those first 2 games because it just put them into negative game states in both games. Seattle ran 142 offensive plays in these 2 games, 119 came while trailing, and that's what boosted some of their yardage. Their 2 highest yardage totals in the fourth quarter this season came in these 2 games against the Rams. So they were kind of in like jailbreak scenarios. Remember the last game, the Thursday night game, that ended up being a really awesome finish. They were down 30-14 with like 13 minutes left in that game.
And people were panicking about Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Right.
Like absolutely panicking. And then they came in the fourth quarter in overtime, right? And, he got there. But they weren't good in the first 3 quarters, I think, either game on offense.
No.
Yeah.
No.
They were a real Bears vibe to them, which I guess is fitting that they're getting the Rams here again after what they did to the Bears last weekend.
And that's it goes back 3 starts now. I mean, this is the 5th time Sam Darnold has seen this defense the past 2 years, Chris Shula's defense. And the past 3 matchups, he's had a negative EPA in the last 3 of them. When Seattle's been like able to run their core offense, is why I talk about them staying in more of a neutral game script. They've actually, like, Darnold's been solid. Like, when they can stay in the play action game, he's still been really good. Using play action these 2 games against the Rams, he's 16 of 21, 9 yards per pass attempt, 2 touchdowns. He has 1 interception on the play action stuff, but 0 sacks on those plays. But then when the Rams are able to bully them out and through the game script of this play action and get them in just a static drop back passing game, that's where Darnold's been at his worst. And that was consistent over the course of the season as well. And this is what happened in the Kevin O'Connell offense too last year. Like, when you're able to get him out of the base offense, this is when you start to see some of the warts Sam Darnold still has as a passer. And that was the key for the Rams, was getting ahead in none of those games. Without play action in those games, Darnold was 35, 57, 61.4%. He went from 8.9 yards per pass attempt to play action down to 6.4 on non-play action passes, 0 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, took 4 sacks. And that has really, like I said, that's not these 2 games. It's the course of the season. He only has a 3.4% touchdown rate this year on non-play action passes. And on play action passes, 11.2 yards pass attempt, 10% touchdown rate on play action passes. And then we've seen Seattle kind of like insulate Darnold. We talked about it last week, reducing his depth of target, trying not to push the ball downfield as much, negate some of those turnovers. But it's gonna be interesting to see how that project's like. The Rams have been a bad defense the past 8 weeks, and they've been really reliant on being a very boom or bust defense, getting turnovers, creating havoc. But when they don't get turnovers and create havoc, like, teams have just continuously stacked yardage on them. So that's the emphasis number 1. Seattle has to play in just a more neutral game environment than they did these previous 2 games this season.
And we also have, and we have to always, I forgot to mention to the top, but we record this on Thursday morning. Last week, we recorded before we got word of Sam Darnold's injury. Yeah, obviously, it seemed to be nothing, but he didn't have to throw. He had, 17 attempts in that game. Could that be something? Can he push the ball down the field now that we're another week? He was limited, I believe, on Wednesday with that injury, which makes sense. Take it easy on your quarterback heading into this game. But yeah, I mean, that is another aspect. And you mentioned the havoc part of the Rams. If you can get pressure on Sam Darnold, that can cause this havoc. That can lead to these turnovers, right? And we know the Rams, you mentioned all the Rams issues, and it's kind of the same deal with the Broncos, right? Even though they've had these issues, they can get pressure still. They can still get after the quarterback. They've gotten after Darnold before. And as I mentioned, they have some injury issues at tackle as well. And so, yeah, there are a lot of questions here for Darnold and what they want to do. But if they can push the ball down the field against these outside corners and kind of what we've seen, Emmanuel Forbes come back to earth a little bit. Ahkello Witherspoon is out. Like, maybe they could have some success down the field, but do the Seahawks even want to do that? Are they trying to do that anymore with Sam Darnold?
Yeah, and I believe they're going to call this game largely conservative. They're going to rely on this defense, how it's been performing the back end of the year. Maybe, and the Rams haven't been quite as good, the past month, since these last teams played. Like, Matthew Stafford's just been, and he was sun running, so like he was always like just being pulled down, like just coming to earth a little bit. Doesn't mean he's been a bad quarterback outside of last week. It's just that we haven't seen him operate at the same capacity. Like, when these teams played in the regular season, there was like a tale of 2 games. The Rams, they had their fewest yards in week 11 that they gained all season. And then in the week 16 matchup, they had the most yards they gained all season. So kind of a very volatile, kind of performances from the offense too in both outings.
On that, on the Seahawks offense, we obviously have the Zach Charbonnet injury. And so that opens up, we would assume, Kenneth Walker is the clear running back 1. We may get George Holani back this week. I don't think we're putting a lot of stock into that. Velus Jones, as I mentioned to you on a call yesterday, Velus Jones ran as many routes as Kenneth Walker in the second half. So that's obviously important, right? 2 of the 6 routes. That's important. That's something you should keep. That's something you should keep in mind for sure. But we obviously have this situation in the backfield with Kenneth Walker, and Kenneth Walker can have a lot of success. He can have a lot of success specifically, I think, against this Rams defense. But we know that Kenneth Walker is more boom or bust, right? And so what if we get more of the bust in this situation? What does that do with what the Seahawks want to do? So it's interesting. We like Kenneth Walker to get more involved as a pass catcher in this matchup, which that obviously opens up a bigger avenue to big plays. They can get him in space. But Walker's, I think, going to be a very, very important player in this matchup and kind of what the outcome is.
Especially because I believe that they are going to want to, play this game more conservatively than the previous 2. Try to run the football early, try to protect Darnold, whether it be by injury or just, insulation from the matchup, how previous matchups have gone. And Seattle's run game has been really good. It's a bummer that Charbonnet got hurt because like it was really kind of firing the way they were calling plays. They were actually running the ball at the end of the year, similar to like what you thought they were doing earlier in the season, where they were just running for the sake of running because that's what the offense did. But then we started to finally get the production at the end of the year. Charbonnet was explosive, but they've rushed for 171, 163, 180, 175 yards the past month after they were 22nd in the NFL in rushing yards per game prior. And that was while with being a dominant defense and playing the most snaps ahead in the NFL during the course of the regular season. But we did see one game, and it's all the way back in week 3 with Charbonnet being out, but we got a glimpse of just, how much Walker could probably play. And before that game got out of hand in that week 3, he had 8 of 9 backfield touches in the first half, 17 of 18 backfield touches through 3 quarters. He ran a pass route on 56% of the dropbacks through 3 quarters. With this game being a elimination game in the playoffs, I believe we're going to see a lot asked of Kenneth Walker in this game. Not asking George Holani to play major reps in this game, right? You're not asking Cam Akers and Felix Jones to play major reps in this game. I believe Kenneth Walker is going to basically flirt with one of his highest snap shares, in probably his early career. So it couldn't work out better for Kenneth Walker, right? Like him, approaching free agency, having this, strong end to the finish. And if he can absolutely cap this run off with a good performance here in the NFC Championship game and then potentially Super Bowl, the price of the brick goes up.
How dare you disrespect Velus Jones in this way? Finishing up with the Seahawks. I mean, we obviously know Jackson Smith and Jigba. We don't have any concerns about what we're going to see out of him. Are there any secondary pass catchers, though? We're not going to get Elijah Arroyo back, it seems like, although I guess we kind of thought we were going to get him back last week. That obviously affects AJ Barner a little bit. We saw Cooper Kupp get a lot more involved last week. This is, we got the revenge game narrative here for him. Shaheed apparently just doesn't catch passes. He only returns punts and kicks for touchdowns. So still useful, but not as much from an offensive perspective. So any of these secondary pass catchers that you're really focusing on this week?
Not really. Barner had 2 solid games against them in both outings. Obviously, like he's still kind of like a player in the red zone as well. If you're in these short game slates, I mean, Hunter Henry is going to be immensely popular on your 2-game slate just by proxy of what's available at the position to choose from. So he's got some, mild interest, because I still think if they're going to be trying to run the football, he's still going to be on the field a lot because he's so impactful in the run game. That maybe he'll have a little bit like a reduction in terms of route participation if Arroyo's active, but I still believe Barner's going to play a lot of snaps because of his activity in the run game and how I believe Seattle wants to approach this game. But Jackson and Jigba is kind of interesting in this matchup. Not that, you're expecting him to fail. Like he's still very good. And we know that where the targets are going to go, and the Rams are still beat up on the exterior, but the Rams did place a pretty high emphasis on like just controlling him in the 2 games. Because remember, in both these games, like Seattle threw the ball an absorbent amount, and Jack Smith and Jigba had his 2 highest route totals of the season in these 2 games. If the Seattle's just playing in a more conservative nature and the game script's not as wonky, like we could see those routes come down as just by default. And he had just 2 solid games against them. You brought up like he needed that 4th quarter in the second game to kind of get over. Teams in the second half of the season are very conscientious of, not getting beat like downfield, especially by Jackson Smith and Jigba. So it does become a little bit interesting if this game is more conservative. Does he have like the complete apex run out like we saw like earlier in the season?
On to the Rams. I thought it was interesting what we saw from them offensively last week. Interesting. Maybe that's using the derogatory side of interesting with what they did. We did see them go a little bit bigger at the end of the game, run it with Kyron Williams and not Blake Corum, which I do think is something we need to talk about, what that split looks like moving forward. But they did not have as much success with their big formations against the Seahawks this year. Was that a reason they decided not to use it as much against the Bears? Are they trying something different? I'm not sure, but I am interested in what the Rams choose to do here. And then I'm also interested in how much success do we get from Matthew Stafford? Because as you mentioned, he has come back to earth a little bit from where he was. And this is obviously a very tough defense, one of the best defenses in the league. It's one of the best defenses against wide receivers in the league, which is obviously where he wants to go with his targets, Tapuka Nakua and Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams especially has a really tough spot here. And so there are lots of questions for this Rams offense that has been so good all year and what they're able to do against the Seahawks defense.
And it did 2 up and down games, right? Like the first game, they kind of got out and played good offense early on. And then Seattle found the counterpunch. And then the Rams did really nothing the rest of that game. And then the Rams absolutely shredded them in Seattle in week 16. But Stafford now has completed fewer than 60% of his passes in 5 of his past 6 games. Last week was the first time he didn't throw 2 touchdowns a game, let alone 1, since week 6. And it was just really weird. Like they dusted off the ghost of Jordan Whittington and played a ton of 11 personnel against the Bears, which was like a huge favor to them, especially with TJ Edwards being out. And listen, Sean McVay knows a lot more about football than I'll ever know. And he's always been one to kind of see where the chess pieces are going and try to be ahead of that. But it was a very odd game plan because they weren't successful. It'd be one thing if like they did that and like, it's like, oh, look at him. He was ahead of the curve again, but they had their lowest, passing play success rate of the season last week. They only ran 7 plays out of 13 personnel. Seattle was really good in the week 11 game when the Rams went to 13 personnel, but then they were really poor. They get 5.9 yards per play against the Rams 13 personnel in week 16. Devontae Adams didn't play in that game, so maybe that's why they played a lot of 13 personnel. And then the other thing, weird thing that I think underneath the hood that Sean McVay's done in both these playoff games is they're not running any play action in either game. I mean, against Carolina, we actually thought it was a sharp move. We were like, hey, reduce the play action against,
line up and play.
Line up and play, a team that disguised their coverage. But then against Chicago, Matthew Stafford only had a 19% play action rate, which is his 3rd lowest rate of the season, only ahead of that Carolina game the week prior and one other game in the regular season. And in the 2 games against Seattle, like 43% play action, 31% play action, 4 of his 5 passing touchdowns in Seahawks came with play action this year. That's the weird thing. Like, bring back the play action and the under center stuff, and see if they, bring that back here too. But it's not a match on paper. I think like we want to poke the bear with. It's like, it feels like the Rams already had their kind of one outlier game against them because Stafford went from a season low in passing yards in week 11 to a season high in week 16. How many 450 passing yard games do we believe the Seattle defense is going to allow? Right. I don't think that we can count on that happening in repeating the week 16 matchup. I think it's probably more in the middle of those 2 matchups, but McVay did have answers for the defense in the second matchup as well. So it's gonna be interesting to see what kind of calibrations made for Mike McDonald and Sean McVay in round 3, but got to bring back the play action here this week.
I mentioned Devontae Adams has a really tough matchup, but Puka has had success against this team. Obviously had a ton of success in week 16. Puka is a god. Like, again, we have 2 of the best receivers in the league in this game. What they're going to try to focus on them, I would imagine, both the defense and the offense. So it'll be fun to watch that situation. But I am intrigued by the Rams backfield because we saw last week it tilts a lot more towards Kyren Williams. Blake Corum has had success this season. He's been one of the most explosive backs in the league this season. We saw them not completely, but we saw them get away from him a little bit last week. Do we see that trend continue? Do they just trust Kyren Williams more? And, they were, I guess, maybe resting him and keeping him fresh for this playoff run. And now they're going to try to unleash him. I'm not sure, but that Rams backfield, again, it's one of those situations where I thought we had a pretty good handle of what their plan was with Williams and Corum. And then we saw that change last week. And I wonder if we're going to continue to see that bigger split or maybe even a larger split as we move forward.
I think that just when you look at that backfield split the way it's been this year, it's just we haven't seen very many instances for the Rams like when the chips are down.
Yeah.
And I think that just what happened is the chips were down, and then you see Kyren Williams like because he plays a little bit more in the passing game. The Rams have run the ball 47% of the time with Corum in the games. Like if Corum's in the game, there's usually a pretty big tell. Like you have high odds of it being a run. Whereas
what was the game where Corum fumbled and we thought that was the reason why he didn't really play, but really it was just the Rams were in comeback mode and Kyren, I think, caught 2 touchdowns in the second half. And that's what we saw. I can't remember what game that was, but that was a good indication of what they're looking for from, I think, these running backs.
100%. And that's what I think it happened. So like if this game I think is neutral, you'll see kind of the similar split we've had. And then if it's kind of falls behind, or the Rams are pressed to throw more, which I actually think could happen here because Seattle's so good against the run. It just comes down to those turnovers again, right? Like, so the opening quarter of the week 11 matchup, the Rams had a lot of success running on Seattle because Seattle was like, hey, if you're going to play heavy, we don't care. We're going to play big nickel because that's what we do. We have, Nick Manowari, who's like one of the best hybrid players in the NFL. And they gave up some big runs in that game. The two longest runs Kyren Williams had this year came in that first quarter of that Week 11 matchup. But then they completely shut down the Rams backfield the rest of that game. In the Week 16 matchup, they were really effective against the backfield again. It's just they played in negative game script the whole time and it allowed just both Corum and Kyren Williams to get a lot of touches. In the second matchup, Kyren Williams only averaged 3.3 yards per touch in the second game, but he had 26 touches. So even if you're only getting 3 yards per touch, if you get enough of them, you're going to have enough yardage, right? And then Corum was really ineffective in both these games. He did score a touchdown in the second game, but 15 touches for 61 yards in Week 16, 9 touches for 5 yards in Week 11. It's probably more of a better matchup for Kyren Williams. And then also, I think if the chips are down, McVay's going to trust Stafford more than the run game. That's, I think, what happened last week too. Almost cost them the game, I think, too, the approach that they had. But 9 career postseason games with the Rams, Stafford had. He had 40 pass attempts in 5 of those, 36 or more in 7 of those 9 games. So I do think we're going to see a high drop back rate too for the Rams. And I don't think they're going to just line up and run the ball and bully the Seattle front around, because Seattle's been one of the best run defense in the NFL all year. The fewest yards per carry allowed to running backs this season. They've allowed a run of 10 or more yards on 4.6% of backfield runs. It's the highest rate in the NFL. So I do think it probably just sets up to be more of a Kyren Williams type of game anyways.
It was a 49ers game where that happened, where Corum ended up with just the one carry for 13 yards, but that went over the longest. So we really appreciate Corum for that, for going over the longest for us in that game. But yeah, Kyren had 10 targets in that game, finished 866 and 2 touchdowns through the air. And so, yeah, if the chips are down, we could see him more involved in that regard as well. All right. So I asked you about kind of what we're doing with this first game. If we're doing the 2-game slate, obviously this game is going to be much more popular. We'll see a lot more ownership tilted towards this game. I mean, Kenneth Walker is going to be the most popular player on the slate. Will there be anybody else that's then higher than that? I kind of doubt it. Right. So how are we approaching this? Any thoughts on this from a DFS perspective?
Yeah, Kenneth Walker's a really tough guy to pivot away from, but
this is in a 2-game slate. You just play Kenneth Walker and you try to differentiate elsewhere. I don't really see the pathway away from Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, it would have to be Kyren Ramondre. You could maybe, get enough touchdown equity out of those 2 players to where if it's Walker doesn't score a touchdown, right? Then you're in, you could soak up, 2 to 4 touchdowns with those other guys. You're in a good spot.
But you want to play 3 running backs anyway. Is kind of where we are. So
yeah, especially on this slate, because none of the wide receivers, really stand out either in the early game. We didn't really kind of go over those guys, but no one really stands out from a matchup perspective. Here you've got the 2 really popular guys, but they're also really expensive. If you're going to play it's really hard to play both Jackson Smith and Jigba and Puka Nacua. You can do it because you have punt options on the slate, but the more conservative builds are going to be 3 running back builds, maybe with one of those guys as well. So yeah, that's probably a way to do it though, is just to get, if you want to get cute in a single entry, is to go with those 2 running backs, maybe to build against the grain. But Puka Nacua is definitely just still the standout star of this game for me. Just what he did in these 2 games against Seattle is just such a testament to how good of a player he is and how good he is. Sean McVay is getting him the football. And I know the first game he didn't light up the box score, 7 for 75, but remember, keep in context, he only ran 21 routes in that game. They didn't it's not like he
didn't he have one of his numerous season-ending injuries before he returned to the game? Wasn't that before halftime? That's what happened?
Yeah, he lost a fumble in that game too, but he had 3.6 yards per out run in that game. Then obviously the 225 when they played in Week 16. Over the past 10 games, Seattle has allowed 2 wide receivers to go over 60 yards, and it was Puka Nacua. Both he's the only guy. He has the 2 highest yardage games over the past 10 games against them. So it's just that's just a testament to how good of a player and how good he is in this scheme, and that McVay can get him open. So I'm expecting the Rams to have a lot of dropbacks in this game. So Puka Nacua still is by far, I think, the best play on the slate for me.
I wonder if that means, if we do expect them to get back to larger personnel, that we should be playing Parkinson. Is that the guy that we should be very interested in? Because we know he gets targets. We know there's not a good place to attack the Seattle defense, but if you are attacking them through the air, the tight ends are at least a better avenue than especially like outside wide receivers. I am not a Devontae. I mean, if he has a big game, he has a big game, but Devontae Adams, he could catch 2 passes and they both be touchdowns and you're fine, right? Like that's the way that Devontae Adams is, but I think he's going to struggle in this game. So I wonder if Parkinson's the way you go, because we know when he's on the field, at least he's going to earn targets, and we don't know how much he's going to be on the field, but we saw Higbee be secondary to him last week in terms of playing time. So I am interested in Parkinson because, as you said, like what else are you doing at tight end? Hunter Henry's going to be popular, but what is he going to catch? 2 passes and you hope one of them's a touchdown. AJ Barner, we have, if he's just going to be blocking, or Arroyo, we have concerns. So yeah, I think Parkinson's is very interesting, but also because of those concerns will be popular as well. Are we throwing any Terrence Ferguson? I know Terrence Ferguson is your guy now because of the touchdown bets that you've won with him, but are we throwing any Terrence Ferguson out there? Like it's just, you're having to get cute, I think, at tight end.
Yeah, and I think if you are going to get cute, it would be Ferguson. I mean, Parkinson obviously is like, I think the safest play of the Rams, but like on a small slate, like the types of, because anytime Ferguson has been available to play, like he went right back to like a decent role in the offense. Like he was just right underneath Parkinson in terms of routes run. Tyler Higbee was the guy who was really dinged by the reduction of 13 personnel because Ferguson doesn't really play tight end. Is the thing. Like he's
a wide receiver. Yeah.
He's played 22% of his snaps at wide receiver, 27% in the slot. Like, so, add those up, that's 50%. They're just right here 50%. So he's like basically playing receiver.
I didn't know that'd be math.
He's averaging 18 air yards per target. So on a small slate, like if Ferguson does something, he's probably going to do it in a capacity where it's a big play.
Yeah, like if he catches a pass, it'll probably go for 40 yards. That's the way we are. That's where we are with Ferguson, and maybe that's into the end zone. And so, yeah, I think that's a path there as well. All right, that's it for us. If we didn't talk about, as Rich mentioned, we didn't really talk about Cortland Sutton. Really didn't talk about Stephon Diggs in the first game. All of that is available as part of the worksheets. Head over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Read the worksheet previews from Rich Hribar. You'll get all of his thoughts on those players and every fantasy relevant player in those games. Of course, that's part of our playoff package, which you can get just the conference championship week. You get those for $25. Head over to sharp.football. Check that out. You get all of our recommendations, our best plays of the week, which have obviously been on fire this season. That's already been released. So you can go and check out what our best play of the week is, our elevated props, which are 4-0 in the playoffs. All of that is available as part of that package. Head over to sharp.football. Check that out. Rich and I will be back next week, and we'll have a lot to do with the Super Bowl here on the podcast feed. So make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening to us. We really, really appreciate it. And we'll be back to talk with you next week.